Hello, everyone. This is Suzanne from Young Timers. Thank you for joining us today for the topic of financial planning after becoming symptomatic with early onset Alzheimer's disease. I have Dan with me. Dan is a family member from the Dominantly Inherited Alzheimer's Network. He is one of 6 siblings. His family has a dominant mutation, and 4 of the siblings have been diagnosed as being positive, and 3 are actively symptomatic. Dan has taken on the role of helping his brothers and sister navigate through the journey of financial planning after diagnosis. And he's here today to discuss how it's all gone and to give us a roadmap of what we can do if we find ourselves in the same situation. So Dan, I'm going to hand it over to you. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you, Suzanne, and thanks for having me on. I'm happy to talk about my family's journey and the resources that we used to navigate the journey. First and foremost, I've been privileged to actually be asked by my family members to help them on their individual journey. As Suzanne said, there are 4 of my family members that have tested positive. I am personally involved with each and every one of them on their journey, and 2 of them that are symptomatic, I have helped through the process as a result of a genetic research study that we've been involved in. First of all, this is a terrible disease, and I'm going to talk about what it takes to get through this, but not in the medical terms, but in the personal terms. How do I manage my life from a legal and financial perspective? This is US based, but the topic could be applied in other countries. When I talk about the government programs, I'm sure your government has comparable programs. So number 1 is you need to be patient because you are the patient. And what I mean by that is you need to take care of yourself from a medical perspective. And that is really important, that is job 1. Secondly, you need to be patient in terms of taking your time and being very deliberate in your actions. And again, I'm going to reference some wonderful resources that'll allow you to take a step-by-step process in your individual journey. Thirdly, you need to be honest with yourself, with your family, and others in terms of your illness. At the same time, you need to be careful. You need to determine when, what, and how to tell people, because it will impact your legal and financial affairs as well as your mental health. If you think about the journey of Alzheimer's is, I think I might have it either due to testing, due to my symptoms, due to my family history. That's step 1. Step 2 is, at some point, you're going to go through a level of testing to establish what's known as a baseline. And that baseline mental condition is very important because as cognitive impairment takes over, you're going to experience a decline in your cognitive abilities and memory capabilities. And if you don't have a baseline, they don't have any way to judge if you are in decline. The next step in the journey is you've experienced some level of decline possibly even significant decline, to the point where you need to start talking to people outside of your immediate family, friends, and more importantly, work. And I'll talk about that process in the journey. The next step in the journey, it's gotten worse, and something at work actually needs to change beyond what the term that's going to get used is accommodation. You may be able to continue to work, but only with accommodations. And as soon as you say the word accommodations, that's a big transition point. At some point, you will not be able to do your existing job, but do not quit your job due to your disease, because certain avenues of financial and legal resources will immediately be eliminated, like your disability insurance, your medical insurance, etc. So make sure that before that happens, you have talked to your employer. And then finally, your employment will end and you need to focus on enjoying the balance of your life dealing with the disease. So you need to assemble a team of people. This is not a journey that you go on alone. It's going to take some time and some effort by everybody, but your team needs to have 3 additional resources involved. There's the medical care and life decisions. There's your financial affairs and legal affairs. Those are the 3. Number 1 in picking your team is trust. You need to be able to trust each team member, regardless of what subject area they're going to help you with. Number 2 is they need to have subject matter expertise. Either they have it or they have the ability to get it or find resources to support you. There's wonderful books out there, Getting Your Affairs in Order. There's the Alzheimer's Association. There's the National Institute on Aging. There's lots of resources. In fact, there's such an abundance of resources. We have taken an attempt in preparation for this video to locate and curate a series of resources that you can lean upon in order to help you on the journey. Number 3 is they need to work on your behalf as a team. So teamwork is important. You need a minimum of 2 people to work on your behalf. Typically, you're going to find somebody that's responsible for your medical, mental health, and life decisions. And then you're going to find somebody else that can help you with your legal and financial affairs. That's a pretty natural split. And not everybody needs to be local. I've been able to do this. One of my siblings is local, one is not. And I've been able to do, in my case, I've helped with their medical, financial, and legal affairs. And eventually, I've gotten somebody to take over for both of them, their medical care. But I still am responsible for their financial and legal affairs. There's a wonderful guidebook from the Alzheimer's Association that is linked along with this recording called Taking Action. It's a 45-page booklet that addresses every step in the journey, as well as resources that you can lean upon. Start there. Take a look at the book and figure out how you're going to do that. And you need to work it through prior to onset if possible. And you need to do it with your entire team, hopefully at the same time. One of the things that you'll find is you end up talking to so many people, you have to tell the story over and over again. It's better to get everybody on the same page in the same conversation, because at some point you're not going to remember who you talked to and what you talked about. So before I get into the financial and legal piece, I want to set a baseline understanding about disability insurance, medical insurance, both from an employer as well as government programs. So you need to know what disability insurance you already have, as well as what insurance can I get? Meaning, if I don't have it now, maybe I can buy it. So let's talk about some definitions. There is what's known as income replacement. You've all seen the Aflac Duck commercial. That's an income replacement program. There are private programs like that, there's employer programs like that, and there are government programs. That is typically known as short and long-term disability insurance. Okay. Most often, if people are employed, they have the ability to get short and long-term disability through their employer, or you can buy that in the open marketplace. So that's called income replacement. If I get sick, will that replace some of my income? That's the private employer piece. There's another one from the government, and that government disability insurance is also known as Social Security Disability Income. That disability insurance is known as SSDI. That's a very important step in your journey. Next is you have employer or private medical insurance, and then you also have government insurance. And government medical insurance is split into two components. There's what's known as Medicare and Medicaid. And if you've been diagnosed and you've gone through the journey and you receive SSDI, you are able to, regardless of your age. I mean, I have one sibling that, how old is she now? 60. She is on Medicare, which usually starts at age 65. She started at age 60, which was 2 years to the month after she received her first SSDI check. And that's an important part of the journey, because now your medical insurance gets a lot less expensive through Medicare. The 2 years after you receive SSDI is a national rule. So I've applied for SSDI. I received it's the month you receive your first check. So if you received your first check in January, 2 years later, you will be invited to join Medicare.
Okay.
Okay. Then I'm going to talk about Medicaid. Medicaid is a program for those that have income and asset limitations that essentially establish them as, I'll just say, poverty. And you can think of poverty in two ways, whether they have the assets that are counted or income. Most commonly, it's not your income, because at that point, you're receiving SSDI, you may have some pension, 401k, but you need to spend those assets down in order to qualify for the government to pay for your long-term care, either at home, in a medical facility, or nursing home. And it's important that you manage your financial and legal affairs so that you don't become, I'll just say, bankrupt your entire family, as opposed to bankrupting yourself. And there's a big difference, because you can divest of certain assets, and we'll talk a little bit about that now. There's what's known as the spend down, and there's there's resources out there that allow you to find out what that means for your specific situation. Typically, it's you need to get down to a certain level. Essentially, you have to have assets, liquid assets, of less than $2,000. So if you've got a lot of money, if you've got a house, you've got cars, you need to divest those over time. Time is important because the Medicaid rules have what's known as a look back period. In 49 of the 50 states, California being the exception, it's 5 years. So they'll look back and they'll say, did you give money away? Did you gift things, cars or assets to family or friends below market value? Did you give your house to your brother or your mother? And I'll talk about that a little bit. In my personal journey, I have helped my siblings with their financial and legal affairs, which I'll talk about in a minute, but we have set it up such that those property, real estate assets are no longer in their name. They're in the name of a trust that I'm involved with, and it's not a big deal. People hear estate planning and trust, and most people have never done it. It's not that big a deal. You can do it yourself, or you can seek resources for an attorney once you've made those decisions. And I think that's really important, that you do get somebody involved that's done it. So the look back period, again, 5 years for most people, is important to get those assets out of your name 5 years prior to asking for Medicaid assistance. The final piece of insurance I'll talk about is what's known as long-term care insurance. This is different than disability. Long-term care insurance is a program that pays for you when you need help for your activities of daily living, ADL. And there's 6 specific activities of daily living: being able to toilet, being able to do food preparation, being physically able to do certain things. Typically with Alzheimer's, it's not the physical things, it's the cognitive impairment piece that qualifies people to use what's known as long-term care insurance. Here's my personal journey on long-term care insurance. You need to be honest. If you have discussed your Alzheimer's with your primary care physician or anyone that has medical records that you need to submit in order to qualify for long-term care insurance, you will be eliminated. So either through a research program or through your own pocket, you may choose to have an Alzheimer's diagnosis done, DNA testing done, if you are part of that population that has dominantly inherited Alzheimer's disease. So 2 things. One is keep it private as long as you can and keep it off the grid. If you do it through a research program, do not in any way, shape, or form give that genetic testing lab your insurance information. They don't need it. If you're doing it through a research, they're not going to pay for it. And I've unfortunately had situations where family members, they submitted it to their insurance company because we gave them their insurance information because we were just filling out forms. Don't do that.
So
secondly,
David,
yep.
Oh, I was just going to interject. So long-term care can actually be denied, or can it be offered at a very high rate to patients who are at risk for early onset Alzheimer's disease?
I have never heard of it being approved.
Okay.
I'll just say that. I can't imagine that they would approve it. So
All right.
again, if you can get long-term care insurance. I personally applied for long-term care insurance with my wife and got it before my genetic testing. I did the testing, found out I was negative, and then dropped the insurance. But I had it just in case, because I know what that journey can cost, and it's exorbitant. The second thing on long-term care insurance and your diagnosis, again, you can talk to your doctor about it, but you can also tell your doctor, do not, under any circumstance, put this in your notes. This is a private doctor-patient conversation. I need you to help me with my medical care, but I don't want this to go in the notes. Because if it's in the notes, the insurance company, the long-term care insurance company, is going to see it and deny you. Let's talk about financial planning. Again, reference that document at the top about taking action. Again, there's lots of good resources available. You need to find out where you're at financially. You need to assemble your documents. What are your assets? What are your liabilities? Put that together and work with the team member that I've discussed earlier to figure out what you need to do on your journey for when you become symptomatic. Secondly, you need to get your legal affairs in order. You need a will. I'm going to pull up the book I've got for my sister here. You need, more often than not, a trust that would need to be set up. You need an advance directive for healthcare. In other words, what do you want to happen medically? You need to assign a power of attorney. Who's going to take over your responsibility and act on your behalf legally? That can be laid out in a trust that an attorney will recommend. And then you may need to assign property. And again, in my case, for both of my siblings, we made arrangements to get their real estate out of their name so that so that the look back period start date was either before their onset or early in their symptom onset. And again, they each have financial resources, but that's not going to last forever. They're both young, and as you will find out, medical or long-term life assistance is expensive. Nursing homes, in-home, both, you'll get to a point where it's part-time, but eventually it will become full-time, and possibly they'll need to move into a facility. So let's go back to the workplace. So now you know what the journey looks like. You've assembled a financial plan, know what your assets and liabilities are, and what your financial future looks like. And then you've got the legal things set aside. You need to talk about, who am I going to tell? What am I going to tell them? And when am I going to tell them? Again, great resources out there on how to talk to family members, how to talk to friends, and how to talk to people that you have responsibilities. And what I mean by that, it may be a social or support organization, but more than likely the hardest one is going to be to tell your employer. And you need to be very careful how you tell your employer. You need to document, and I strongly recommend this. You're going to notice symptoms before they do. And I'm going to suggest that you start a log of examples of when you forgot things or situations that people would remember on things that happened that aren't normal. And it's because of your disease. My sister has assembled multiple pages. She is still asymptomatic, but she actually has talked to her employer HR. She hasn't talked to her employer on the record, so to speak. She has talked to their HR off the record. There are employer rules that protect you because of your disease, okay? I won't go into those right now, but you need to know it's difficult to do. You need to figure out when and how to do it. In two of my siblings' cases, I actually went in, talked to their immediate management as well as their HR to talk about the disease, because in both situations they couldn't. My siblings could not, but they had noticed their symptoms at work. Under no circumstance should you resign your job because of your disease. You need to stand up for your rights and say, I know I'm getting forgetful. I have a disease. I need some level of accommodation. And as soon as you say the word accommodation for what you do in your daily job, that's a big trigger point for them, because they have a legal obligation to accommodate if possible. But sometimes it's just not possible. If you're in a technical role, leadership role, in fact, any role, you're going to need your cognitive abilities and memory. And if that starts impacting your job or your safety at your job, I have a brother that started doing stupid things in his job and creating safety risks for him and others. So you need to be aware of that. Once you've told your employer, there's going to be a point where symptoms are obvious. Either you get accommodation or you don't. And hopefully at that time, you've got your financial insurance affairs in order, that you have disability insurance for income replacement. Even if you have that, you will be applying for what's known as Social Security disability income. And one thing that a lot of people miss is that your disability insurance, if your disability insurance says that you get $4,000, let's just say $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year. If your Social Security disability income pays $1,500 of that, you don't get them both. You're going to get $1,500 from SSDI, and you're going to get $3,500, or what would it be? $4,500 from your disability insurance, because disability insurance guarantees that you'll get $5,000 a month, I said. And so SSDI would pay $1,500, and your insurance company would pay the $3,500.
On average, how long did your siblings work after the diagnosis?
Well, my brother worked for over 5 years.
Wow.
He was in what most would consider a blue-collar job. They made accommodation for him. They were wonderful. But again, great employer. We approached it right. They had great people involved. But yeah, he was 5 years. My sister, from symptom onset, I would say 2 years. The first person on this was actually my oldest brother, and it was difficult for him because he had just changed jobs inside the same company, and he had a great track record, and all of a sudden he couldn't learn new things. In his old job, he could lean on, 20 years of experience doing X, but he got a promotion into a new job and he couldn't learn the new skills and manage the team. So he went in for a medical, and then we got involved in a research study, found out his diagnosis. My father had it, his mother had it. You know, we knew there was, you know, that's one thing in this journey I found is there's one thing to know that it runs in your family. There's another to know it's in your blood, literally in your genes. So that's a big deal. Let's talk now about applying for SSDI. Social Security is your friend. I met with Social Security on my siblings' behalf over a year before we applied. I wanted to know what the process was. I wanted to talk to people that knew the rules. What documentation would we need in order to apply? I filled out all that paperwork with the assistance of my family member well in advance of the day that we made the submission. This is terribly important. There's what's known as compassionate allowance, and compassionate allowance is a government definition that says if you have specifically early onset Alzheimer's, you will be on a fast track for SSDI approval. If you have the medical records, if you have the DNA records, it's a given. But if you have the medical records, you will be approved very quickly. Again, in my case, it was less than 30 days on both accounts. But I had all that stuff prepared, and I hit the go button 1 month before they left their job. One thing that you will find with SSDI is you can actually continue to work, but there's an income limitation of so much per month. And I won't go into that because it changes every year, but you can still work either at your current job, is what my brother did, on reduced hours. So he was able to get SSDI plus some incremental income working part-time. So once you've applied and you've been approved, there's a waiting period. I think it's like 60 days. And then the checks start flowing. But you need to wind down your income to a point where you could apply. And again, those rules are well defined, and there's resources from the Alzheimer's Association. There's an SSDI checklist that is in the resource guide as well.
So with the 3 that you've worked with, your 3 siblings, is there anything you wish you would have done differently between working with the first sibling and then the third? Something that you learned on your own that might not be in the guides, the written guides?
Great question. I would say, had I known more about the journey and educated myself about the journey, the things I would have done differently is I would have activated the property real estate transactions as soon as I knew about which way things are going to go. Mm-hmm. Because okay, that starts the 5-year clock. And in my sister's case, we didn't do that as quickly as we probably should have. But I would have done that very differently. Seek legal assistance to make sure that the trust is set up in a way that you can transfer the assets. The other thing is, and this is, yeah, I learned a lot in the process. I'm trying to remember the term. Oh, the cost basis for real estate is important. So my brother has lived on his property for over 20 years. He bought it for X. It's now worth 2X. If he sold that or gave that, and in this case, we literally did a title transfer to my mother, because my mom will die before my brother. She's 89 years old. Several years ago, we transferred the title of the property to her because the cost basis, when it transfers to the trust after she dies, will reestablish the cost basis at a new market price, the 2x, as opposed to if my brother had just done the title to his children, it would have gone across, the cost basis was X, and they would have had to pay, when they sold the property, capital gains on all of that. So that was something, again, I don't want to get into the minutia and the weeds,
Right.
but that's why you need a legal attorney, and you'll talk about property cost basis and title transfer.
Very helpful to know, definitely.
Yeah. And the other thing is, make sure you understand the different types of insurance that you currently have, as well as the ones that you could buy on the open market. But the government has reams of rules that I won't go into, but I learned a lot in the process. And Suzanne, I'm going to offer this up. You have my phone number. You can publish it to this, and I'd be happy to talk people through. It's not a fun journey. It's not an easy journey, but it's a journey that everyone needs to take. And the sooner you start the journey, the better off you're going to be. Once the person becomes symptomatic, if they live alone, I would strongly encourage people to go to the US Postal Service and have their mail routed to the person that has financial responsibility. Let's just say my brother became, well, both of them, we set up auto pay on most of their bills, so we weren't getting penalties. I was added to all their financial accounts. And again, those recommendations are in the documents I've referenced. But I've actually, because my brother lived alone, I had to have all their mail sent to me because it became problematic. He went out and bought, I was talking to him about medical insurance, and he got online and filled out some questionnaire, and suddenly he bought 3 additional sets of insurance for his house, his cars, and his boat. So he had 4 insurance policies in place for the same stuff. And I had to unwind all of that because I didn't know he was doing it.
At that point, was the mail being routed to you?
No, but that was the impetus
Right.
and catalyst for it to get routed to me.
That's true. So when something came, you could approach it and ask him about it, and
Yeah,
like
because
you said,
he can
unwind
still
it.
take phone calls. He can, you know, he was opening the mail. He was online. That's our reality. Is I had talked to him about essentially getting the Medicare insurance, or I'm sorry, it was before Medicare. When he was leaving his job, we needed to get insurance through the online exchange. And he thought I was talking about house and property, you know, insurance. So that was a learning experience.
Definitely. So that was something that you, a very good piece of advice for the audience, having the mail rerouted early. You know,
If the
and
person lives alone, if you have a spouse
Right.
or family member that you're living with, you know, obviously that makes it easier. but setting up your financial affairs to be on auto pay, because now I'm doing it for myself, 2 of my siblings, and my elderly mother. It gets a little complicated.
Right, keeping all that straight. Well, Dan, thank you so much for putting together your written journey and offering it up to the group for everybody to have as a reference, as well as talking about your experience. And your family's very lucky to have you with the experience that you've accumulated and you've been able to use for 3 to 4 of them.
Yep.
So,
and again, I sincerely wish everyone well on their journey. It's not a fun journey, but it's a journey everyone's going to take. My final piece of advice: ask for help early and often by assembling your team of trusted team members. Ask for help. I have been honored to be able to help my siblings. It's a gift they have given to me, not the other way around. So, and I wish to extend that gift to you. And please publish my phone number.
Thank you very much. And by taking that stress off of them, I'm sure you've made their lives easier. And now they can concentrate on being happy and doing some things that maybe they couldn't do before when they were working full time.
Live your best life. Yep.
Right. It's the only one we have, and might be a shorter life, but it doesn't have to be terrible. It can be very gratifying and fun-filled going forward.